welcome back to another edition of Capital Connection. Fridays during the Noon Report, we give you, the listener, direct connection to what's happening in Albany and Harrisburg with the experts on the issues at the state capitals. They are Jason McGuire of New Yorkers for Constitutional Freedoms and Michael Geer at the Pennsylvania Family Institute. Michael, let's begin with you. Breaking news out of Pennsylvania. The first diocese in the state has filed for bankruptcy. That would be the Harrisburg Diocese, representing some 250,000 Catholics in 15 counties. What's your reaction to this story?
Yeah, this announcement was made by Bishop Ronald Gaynor of the Harrisburg Diocese, which has been in existence for more than 150 years. And it just points to the challenge that's facing not only the Catholic Church, but institutions across this country, like the Boy Scouts, which also the National Boy Scouts Council filing for bankruptcy this week as well, points to the devastation that comes with sexual abuse of minors. That when you think about the sexualization of our culture with porn, with things like Drag Queen Story Hour and other things that are sort of pointing to the sexualization of culture, and then the cover-up of it by adults just shows what can happen with this devastation. What will happen now with those who have been abused and are seeking some compensation with bankruptcy, whether it's the Boy Scouts or the Catholic Diocese here in Harrisburg, remains to be seen. Boy Scouts are talking about an 80-day window in which filings can happen for future cases. With the Catholics, it's not clear yet how that is going to pan out in terms of what those who are seeking compensation for abuse will do going forward.
All right. We'll keep our eye on it. Jason, I was wondering if you could comment on a trend that we're noticing here in New York. A number of counties have flirted these Second Amendment sanctuary ideas, basically telling residents of these counties, you don't have to abide by the SAFE Act. I know some sheriffs are a little wary of this. Is this an effective way to protest gun laws in New York?
I'm not so sure that it is. It sends a statement, if you will, that if a county sets up a sanctuary city, that they essentially won't have to abide by the laws of the SAFE Act. But in reality, they're going to be superseded by that state law, and it puts the sheriffs in a bind, because the sheriff has to answer, am I either going to abide by this county resolution declaring the sanctuary place for the Second Amendment, or am I going to abide by the law of the land as laid out in the state law? And so there is a concern there. I would rather see the pressure applied to state legislators and to Albany. I think it's desperation that is leading people to come up with these kinds of resolutions, but we've got to get engaged in the electoral process and just replace some seats in Albany with people who will uphold constitutional principles.
All right. Well, speaking of the election, there was a story this week, Michael, about how the immigrant population in Pennsylvania, which everybody knows is such an important state when it comes to the results this year, some 43,000 immigrants have become citizens since the 2016 election. How do you think this could impact 2020?
Well, that's an interesting question. When you think about that 43,000 number, that's roughly the number that Donald Trump won the state of Pennsylvania in the 2016 elections. And so a lot of people are looking at that thinking, wow, this could swing it in a different direction. And the immigrant population is being noticed. I live in Dauphin County, central Pennsylvania, and it's among the top counties in the state in terms of seeing immigrant population increase. And the big issue is whether these new citizens will vote. The typical sort of process in terms of citizenship, they have the right to vote, but many of them don't acclimate themselves to do that, and so it may not have as big an impact as some people think.
Yeah, we would talk about immigrants in New York, this green light law controversy. Last week, Jason, the president said to Governor Cuomo at their infamous White House summit, we'll get back to you next week. I don't know if that's happened. I know that there's litigation in the works here. Is there any more clarity when it comes to these trusted traveler programs, which are in limbo now because of this green light law?
No, there isn't. In fact, we're waiting to hear from the Trump administration as to what will happen next. But you're right, people are in limbo right now. They're kind of waiting to see what the feds are going to do. And frankly, what Governor Cuomo is going to do. I imagine there's a little bit of a standoff to see who's going to blink first that's going on right now.
Yeah. And speaking of Governor Cuomo, he's spending $60 million this year to try and get an accurate head count on this once-a-decade census. April 1st, by the way, is Census Day in New York. And Jason, what do people need to know about the census this year?
Well, they need to know that they need to participate, particularly for those of us in upstate New York. I think sometimes we're reticent to get involved. There are people that, particularly in rural areas, really don't want to engage, don't want to answer the questions, just kind of want to say, leave me alone. Yeah. But the reality is that if you don't participate in the census, you're impacting the federal dollars that will impact things like your schools, your fire departments, and frankly, you're giving more power to New York City. So upstate needs to have representation in the census, and I encourage people to participate in the process.
I remember when I first started in the news business here some 25 years ago, I think we had 33 congressional seats. We're down to 27, probably will be at 26. I know Pennsylvania probably going to lose a congressional seat as well. So, folks, fill out those census forms, even if you don't want to. It matters so much. Michael, your organization made national headlines this week representing this mail carrier from the Lancaster area who is suing the post office because they're forcing him to work on Sunday. Does he have a case here?
We think he does. The attorneys here at our Independence Law Center filed this case on behalf of this mail carrier who has worked for the post office for 7 years, but his job ended when he said because of religious convictions he could not work on Sundays. Now, the post office had accommodated that. He would work Saturdays or other shifts that other postal workers did not want. But with Amazon deliveries coming, the post office changed its policy and said that he had to work on Sundays, and he simply said he could not. And so employers should provide religious accommodations, reasonable accommodations, and that's why we've gone to federal court on his behalf.
We love to find those victories wherever we can. In Albany this week, we saw one, well, this month, I should say, Jason. Crisis pregnancy centers, pro-life resource centers that help abortion vulnerable women have won a legislative victory in the state Senate. Explain this important piece of legislation, if you would.
Yeah, there was a bill that was introduced by Senator Brad Hoylman, a Manhattan Democrat, that we believed unfairly targeted pro-life pregnancy centers. That bill was coming up in the Women's Issues Committee. We asked people to contact their legislators to speak out against this. They responded in great numbers, and I'm pleased to say that at the Women's Issue Committee, Senator Hoylman pulled his bill from consideration. But that really only happens when you know you don't have the votes. And so we believe there's people engaged, use your Legislative Action Center, and reach out to legislators. The legislators pull back on that bill. It's a pro-life win here in the Empire State.
That is awesome. Keep up the great work fighting for the pro-life cause. I know you are, Michael, in Harrisburg. It won't be long before the first inaugural March for Life at the Pennsylvania State Capitol. You're expecting tens of thousands of people to show up for that event in May. Explain what will be happening that day, if you would.
Well, listeners of Capital Connection are going to be the first to hear this news today, Bob, which is that Abby Johnson, the author of the book Unplanned, the former Planned Parenthood clinic director who became pro-life and has outspoken about that issue, will be the keynote speaker at the Pennsylvania March for Life on May 18th, 2020. She's going to be just one of a lineup of some great speakers as we make a pro-life stance in front of the Pennsylvania State Capitol. So we're excited that Abby Johnson's coming, and we hope that your listeners and many others from across the state will make plans to be with us on May 18th, 2020.
All right, we'll give that website at the end where folks can log on and learn more. Jason, before that, though, there's Legislative Day, which is a huge event that you guys put on every March at the state capitol. I think it's happening on St. Patrick's Day this year. But if folks are listening to this program for the very first time and have never heard of this, you're going to hear some great speeches from some amazing people. David Barton from Wall Builders, one of my favorite of all time. He's going to be there. But explain why this is such a priority, this one-day event in Albany.
Well, similar to what we mentioned with the census a few moments ago, legislators look at this event and they look to see if my numbers are up or down. And if attendance at this event is high in an election year, they pay closer attention to what I have to say. If numbers are lower, then they say maybe the Christian community isn't as engaged and we don't have to pay as close attention. So when people are attending Legislative Day, hearing from speakers like David Barton, Michael Ferris, and others, and then also taking action on the issues we're talking about, they're sending a message to Albany that we are engaged and you need to pay attention to what we have to say. And frankly, that's the help I need right now.
All right. We'll get folks registered as best we can. All you got to do is go to a website. Jason, where can they do that?
albanyupdate.com.
Learn more about the March for Life coming up in Harrisburg as well this spring. Michael, what's your site, sir?
PAFamily.org.